Hey guys, welcome to Unlock Your Passive Lifestyle with Tommy Thompson and Justin Keeney. Today's guest is Austin Carlson. We're going to be talking about everything related to structuring real estate deals that have partnership issues and doing that ahead of time and how to do it even right before a closing. We're also going to be talking about OZ 1.0 and the new OZ that's coming out, OZ 2.0. Listen in. Hey guys, today's episode is going to be a really interesting one because we're diving into something that many investors don't ever think about until it's too late. Ownership structures, partnership planning before a liquidity event, and one of our favorite hot topics right now, opportunity zones 2.0. We have our guest on today, Mr. Austin Carlson. Austin's a partner at Gray Reed, and he's a JD and a CPA, and he focuses heavily on complex real estate transactions, tax structuring, 1031 exchanges, opportunity zones, and partnership issues surrounding liquidity events. Austin, thanks for being here.
Yeah, well, thanks for having me.
And we actually just had Austin on a panel this morning for the Palm Beach Estate Planning Council, so we got a full day here.
It was a great event.
Early to late, right?
Absolutely.
First thing bright and early to now we are, kind of getting into evening. And you told me this morning, not only JD CPA, but also real estate salesperson.
Oh, I'm also a licensed minister as well.
All right, Atlanta Life.
Yeah, Universal Life Church. About half the couples that married are still together. So that's about batting average for the U.S. So, it's not bad.
I was about to say
Yeah.
about average American.
Okay.
So your most of your days spent just doing continuing education, right?
You try to find the ones that knock them out for all of them.
Oh, yeah. Maybe the AI helps with that too.
Yeah, what was first? Was it CPA? Was it what came first?
So I went to school first for my undergrad in accounting and master's in tax. I took the CPA exam, but in order to get your CPA license, you have to have a year of experience working under another CPA. So I got my law license first, even though I sat for the CPA exam first.
Man,
So-
those are some busy years.
So did the CPA, then went back to law school effectively.
I went straight through.
Oh, gotcha.
I'm just they call them the K through JD, where you just you stay in school forever. You just keep taking tests, and then you're suddenly a lawyer, and you don't know what you're doing with your life.
Yeah, never grow up.
That's right.
Yeah, be a real boy.
Exactly.
Something like that. Yeah.
Being a lawyer is basically doing homework for a living, so it's pretty exciting.
So with both degrees and both I guess certifications or licenses, right? Both licenses, but you're not you're not filing taxes, right? You're practicing attorney.
Yeah, so
Your day job.
our firm and we just don't do tax compliance. We think while myself and many of the other tax attorneys in our firm are CPAs, we think it's best to kind of delineate, we're in our strike zone. We do structuring of transactions. We do high-level tax planning. Compliance is best left to the CPA firms who are phenomenal at it. We work hand in hand with CPAs. We're all kind of part of the same team working together that we'll come up with a transaction structure. We'll get information from them. We'll help them with getting it plugged in and then they'll kind of get the structure moving on kind of the year to year. So you bring in the tax attorney when there's more kind of a big thing in transactions. Whereas, your CPAs kind of do the annual yearly tax planning and kind of keeping the structure going.
Well, and you and Austin came in from Houston, Texas.
Sure did.
You flew in here to speak on the panel, be on the podcast with us. I appreciate that. Have you been in Houston for all of that, or did you move to Houston?
Yeah, I'm born and raised in Houston.
Yeah?
Went to school at A&M and then UT, which makes me a bad Aggie for those of you who know the A&M UT rivalry. But otherwise, I'm a Texan through and through.
Austin and Austin, right?
I went to law school there. It's fun, yeah.
And then as far as the transaction stuff that you're talking about, and for the folks that are listening, they might assume that's going to be real estate based because that's all Tommy and I talk about to the chagrin of our respective wives. But talk about the types of real estate transactions, like the actual tax structuring high level. And we'll dig into obviously a couple of topics, but when do folks bring you in for these real estate transactions?
Yeah, so, one thing to clarify, while I do tons and tons of real estate transactions, I don't actually do what we call the dirt work.
Yeah.
So
Not a real estate attorney.
I'm not actually
a tax attorney.
Yeah, I'm a tax attorney or real estate structuring attorney.
Yeah.
And we do, my firm and myself, I do other types of domestic and international tax as well. We just happen to have a pretty large focus in the real estate space. But, things that we get brought in on, we're going to talk about today, 1031 exchange items.
Yep.
If you just have a single person that owns, individual taxpayer that owns an individual asset in his or her name, you don't need me.
Right.
And you're just going to do a forward exchange, call a qualified intermediary. There's not a whole lot of hair on that.
Yeah.
Where you start to need tax attorney and tax planning help is when you start having other partners, when real estate is in an LLC or a partnership or, God forbid, an S Corp or C Corporation. We have lots of situations where we have sponsors that have hundreds of investors, and some of the investors want to stay in the deal and roll to the next asset. Some want to get cashed out. Sometimes I've got some multifamily where we will have two different LLCs taxed as partnerships, and each of them will do a 1031 exchange into a larger property of which they're going to now be tenants in common. And so that gets infinitely more complex because you have to analyze a ton of different things, including how is the debt going to be allocated between the two. When you're talking about partners going out, you got to figure out, how do we get them cash? Is the cash coming from the sponsor? Is the cash coming from, we call it fresh equity, more cash off the streets? Or are you going to use there's some complex planning techniques utilizing what's called a Partnership Installment Note, where you can actually use cash from the underlying property that you can get this installment note out to the partner it wants out, isolate the gain surgically to the partner who wants the cash without impacting the other partners who want tax deferral. So 1031 exchanges can be so simple, and people will call me and I'm like, great talking to you. Let me hand you to the qualified intermediary. We know lots. I spoke on a panel today with you. You guys were there with one. It was great. But you don't need me. And then there's sometimes they absolutely need me. And a lot of times they call me. I wish they would call me sooner because they'd be like, well, closing's tomorrow. What do I do?
Yeah.
You're like, all right.
Well, it's funny because Justin and I made the mistake recently. We said this in front of a whole room of CPAs and attorneys. We like complex deals. We work on complex deals. And what do we get after that? We get the most complex deals, right?
Of course.
But that's kind of the world that you live in. And I
Mhm.
mean, that's why we've been able to work so well together, because we're constantly encountering people who are selling properties. And it's wild to me. You said a lot right there, and we'll unpackage all that. But we get the ones that people have owned a 36-unit apartment building in their own name and individually, not
Mhm.
in an LLC, for years and years. And that kind of blows my mind. But then we encounter, the deals where they come to us and one partner wants to do one thing, another partner wants to do another. So just kind of rewinding a little bit, getting basic. What's a common basic problem that you're solving pre-sale in a partnership issue?
Yeah, let's dive into the things that people hear about the most. If you're Googling it or looking at your AI, you're going to see drop and swap and drop, especially the drop and swap. And I want to give a little education history behind this. First, I hate the name drop and swap. I don't think that it is instructive and helpful. I think that a better name would be distribute and exchange, because that's what you're doing. You're distributing the property out of the LLC or the partnership, and then you're doing a 1031 exchange. It's just, I think drop and swap is catchy.
Should we print up T-shirts?
Distribute
and exchange.
Oh, only the three of us are going to wear it. Everybody else could be like, who are these people? Are they drug dealers? Like, what is this?
Distribute and exchange. Yeah. So, all right. So talk about distribute and exchange.
Okay. So distribute and exchange is one of the number one kind of common 1031 problems. It may be the equivalent of like a doctor like diagnosing a cold.
Yeah.
You see it literally every day of the week. Most investors, or a lot of people when they invest, again, it's very simple if you are a sole owner.
Yeah.
But we're now talking about a situation where you have multiple owners.
Well, so I'll give you context, right, or perhaps a scenario. Real estate oftentimes is a team sport, right?
Mhm.
You have somebody who's high level financials, somebody who is boots on the ground, operational, managing property, whatever it is. A lot of times, people get into real estate with buddies. They buy properties together. They raise money from friends and family. Sometimes it's family-owned property where dad or granddad was the one that bought or developed, and now the next generation owns, and so there's maybe 2 or 3 siblings, right? So let's say a situation where, you've owned a property for a while. It's either you and 2 siblings, or it's you and 2 buddies. You're in a partnership and you're looking to sell. You've got highly appreciated properties, so you obviously have a tax liability, a capital gains issue, and you're looking to do an exchange. And these people, causing the distribute and exchange, right? The reason why you're looking at is because these people want to go separate ways, right? So let's say you've got like 3 people and they want to break apart, but they also want to do a 1031 exchange. So talk about it maybe in that context, right? Because that's probably some variation of that is the most common thing.
That's exactly right, that there's different partners have different goals. And a lot of it is you have to figure out, are the majority wanting to stay within the same confine, or like, do an exchange? Are the majority wanting cash? And then here's the other question is, the people that want to exchange, are they in agreement on exchanging into the same property? Or let's say the 3 of us have an LLC, and one of you wants cash, and one of us wants property A, and one of us wants property B. That's another outcome. So when there are solutions. One of these days, I'm going to create this absolutely beautiful one-page, like this flow chart.
Then.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
It's very if-then like, and I realized this after having this conversation at least 1,000 times. And there's a known universe of different ways this can go. But let's just talk about a few common ones. So a pretty easy one is, let's say that one of us, Tommy, wants cash, right? And then Justin and Austin are going to stay in, and we're in agreement on the replacement property we're going to get.
Yeah,
that's pretty simple, because what we will do in that case is we will make a distribution. We're going to distribute out, but Tommy's not going to exchange. We're going to distribute out 1/3 of the property
to Tommy.
And
Tommy's out of the partnership.
He is out of the partnership.
You and I are still in the partnership.
We're still in it. Yeah.
Our partnership owns 2/3 of the property.
Exactly.
We're distributing out. So now Tommy owns directly his 1/3 interest in the property.
Yeah.
Right. As a tenant in common.
As a tenant in common. So it's a real property interest. If Tommy just wants cash, it's pretty simple, because when we come to the closing table, there are 2 sellers.
Yeah.
It's our former LLC owned by Justin and Austin, and Tommy is 1/3 seller. Tommy takes his cash. We do our 1031 exchange. Pretty simple. Now, I will say, if you have a lender, that distribution out is going to be in violation of your loan covenants.
So if the property that we're selling, we've got a mortgage on it, right? And when we do that distribution, we are violating the current mortgage covenants, potentially.
I mean, not officially. I mean, I haven't looked at our loan documents because I'm not our dirt lawyer.
Yeah,
but,
sure.
No, I mean, you're definitely violating it. But it's one of those things that if you do it a nanosecond before closing, and then at closing the lender gets paid off.
And that's what I was going to ask you too. Perfect world scenario, how far out should you do this restructuring? And if there's a loan, it changes things. But how far out ideally should you do it? And then you just said a nanosecond before. So I mean, technically you could do it right before, but you don't want to.
Well, this is another issue you get. So people oftentimes are a little wary to maybe get a lawyer involved, because I get it. Like, until you know for sure you're going to close, you don't want to pay fees. I mean, I would be the same way. But if you wait too long, while I would make it effective, a day before, it doesn't have to be a nanosecond, you have to have it in motion kind of at least a week or 2 before, because again, at the closing table, Tommy's a seller, like actually a seller, and there needs to be a deed recorded showing that Tommy's a third.
And he's got to have his own purchase and sale agreement, right?
I mean, it could be included as a seller, right? Yeah. There's a variation upon this that is a little bit simpler in some ways, but instead of doing the distribution out for Tommy to receive a third and be a seller, we can utilize, this is one of the times where we can utilize this PIN note I talked about. So PIN stands for Partnership Installment Note. And I'm not going to get too far into the weeds, but effectively the qualified intermediary, so you do the LLC stays together, band stays together.
Yep.
We sell 100% of the property.
Yep.
All the cash goes to a qualified intermediary. Then the qualified intermediary actually issues a promissory note to our LLC. And then the LLC issues the promissory note to Tommy, who wants cash. And that promissory note generally pays 95% immediately and then 5% in the following year.
So 95% of his share of the cash
Right.
immediately, and then 5% in the following year. And that makes it an installment note. Right?
Correct. And so because it's an installment note, due to some technicalities of how the boot rules work in partnership property redemptions, we, Justin Austin staying in, don't recognize any gain. Tommy recognizes all of his gain. It works. Now, Tommy's got to wait till January 1 to get his other 5%. He may not love that. But from a closing mechanics, we don't mess with any of the closing mechanics.
Right. We're not in violation of loan covenants. Right.
Absolutely. So the PIN note is attractive for, and a lot of times when people come to me and it's kind of too late to do the distribution out, then we kind of have to do the PIN note.
Sure.
Now, let's do another variation of this. Let's say that Justin and Austin want to stay in, and we have a property we want to keep, but Tommy wants a different property. So we could do the same thing where we tick out. Now this is the actual distributed exchange. We tick out Tommy. Tommy sells 1/3, and then he decides to do a 1031 exchange on his own.
His own separate. So now two separate exchanges.
Right. And our LLC does a 1031 exchange.
Yep.
As to our LLC, we don't really have any risk.
Sure.
So we were holding the investment, and then a third of it went away, but nothing's really changed.
And risk you're talking about is tax or audit risk.
Yeah.
Right?
But
and that's because there are vesting rules, right? You're supposed to have held property for a certain period of time before you exchange.
So this gets into what is the classic drop and swap conversation and risk or distribute and exchange. So the code 1031 black letter law says you have to hold the property for investment purposes or use in a trade or business. So raw land, great. Anything you're renting out, great. Things that don't work, personal property.
Right.
Please don't try to 1031 your vacation home unless you've let it sit for a couple of years. There's things you can do, safe harbors. If you're considered a dealer, which basically if real property is inventory,
Flippers, home builders.
Yeah, absolutely. It's not good. But the other issue is that if you received property as a distribution from an LLC and then immediately do a 1031 exchange, the question is, what was your intent with respect to that 1/3 interest? So the LLC that we were all in together, it was renting property or whatever it was doing.
Right.
It had requisite intent.
And it's got a track record to show that. Right. We owned it together for 2 years, 3 years, 10 years, right? We owned it together. But Tommy's owned his 1/3
a day.
If you do it at the closing table for 1 second before he sold it.
So this is one of those areas that there's a few of them in the 1031 rules where, there's some revenue rulings from the 60s and 70s where the IRS says you can't do that. That's bad. That's not good intent. You acquired it with the intent to do a 1031 exchange. You're in trouble. There's some court cases that disagree with the IRS. They rule against the IRS and say, IRS, you're wrong. There should be some sort of carryover, which is logical, right? I mean, whether or not, we carry on our team sport business together as the three of us or go our separate ways, why does that really matter? Right. It's still a continuation of the investment, right, which is the spirit of 1031, continuation of real estate investment. The IRS, in response to those court cases, put a big middle finger up and said, we don't acquiesce to those. So what that means is if you ask me what I think the law is, I think that you could do it. But if you ask the IRS how they're going to audit you, they're going to potentially say that's not eligible. And there's also what I like to say that the IRS has put, when you fill out tax returns, and hopefully you're not having to do it, and I don't even like filling out my own tax return. There's lots of check boxes you got to do. They're always trying to catch you in something. And if you look at a 1065, I don't know why you would, but if you're one of those people that likes to look at 1065s, there's a question, just an informational question mark that talks about, did you distribute property out to a partner in the prior 2 years? So they're trying to catch this specifically. So they're looking for it and they're making you check yes or no.
When I can't sleep at night, I pull out my 1065s.
That's great.
And I review them. And
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Well,
between that and listening to this podcast,
Oh, I know.
I
It's
mean,
gonna
they're
knock
gonna
you right.
cure insomnia, guys. Doing the world a favor.
well, it's kind of funny because, we get the question all the time. They have a partnership, they're trying to get out of it. It could be siblings, they hate each other, whatever, partners that just want to do different things or whatever it is. And, we always bring up, hey, we have an attorney that we can put you in touch with. We recommend that you schedule a time with them. And it really, you're talking about the cost, right? $50,000 tax bill to some people is a lot of money, right? To other people, it's nothing at all. But we encounter, deals like we're working on one, with a client of ours right now. She's going to have $2 million, $3 million tax bill. So when you get into those kind of numbers, the ROI on trying to figure this structure out so you can go your separate ways. It's the same thing with the 1031. We tell people all the time, hey, if you're not sure if you want to do the 1031, just enter into it. It costs like $2,500 to do the exchange and you extend your clock, 45 days to figure it out. That ROI is pretty good if you have a big tax bill. So, I mean, you're probably working on pretty sizable deals, or do you work on the smaller ones? Or, I mean, average deal size for you is probably
Yeah, I mean,
college, right?
it ranges, but I mean, I don't usually see transactions much smaller than a couple million.
Yep.
And so there's usually a sizable enough gain. And some of these kind of basic blocking and tackling, which is what I consider the drop and swap, they're, again, it's kind of the flow chart. Like we got to diagnose it correctly, but the actual mechanics are not that difficult. It's
Sure.
the of saying, coming up with here's your diagnosis of how to fix it.
Yeah.
That's where the large amount of value is.
You sort of triage, and then it's very programmatic from there. Yeah, you know what you're doing. There's not too much, research or critical thinking that goes into it because, yeah, it is very much if this, then that, right? If A, then B.
Now, different when we're talking about sponsors with large assets and doing other things like that. But when we're talking about, team sport, 3 of us got together and have had, this multifamily we've owned it for 8 years, and now we're figuring out what to do. It's not so bad.
Convoluted, multiple entity, multiple investor, related transaction. We had somebody a couple of years ago.
Saying the R word, oh God, that keeps me up at night. People lie to me about related parties.
It's like the dagger.
Yeah, twist the knife.
Yeah.
We had somebody ask some questions, and I very quickly get out of my depth and over my head, and I bring in a guy like yourself. I had somebody a few years ago asking about, I've got some investors in this deal. I want to sell out of that, buy into that deal. We own both deals. There's different investors in property B than there are in property A. We're trying to cash some people out. And it was just like, you needed a flow, talk about a flow chart. You needed a flow chart just to keep track of, the different parties that were involved before you even got to trying to diagnose and evaluate and whatever. So that's where you're making the big bucks. That's where if it's doable, that's where you're
there's a lot of complexity, and then figuring out the boot, like I said, how the debt's allocated, especially if you're all going into one new property, you've got to allocate the replacement debt amongst the selling properties or partnerships and figure out what the relinquished debt is. And then if you've got fresh equity coming in, it's very interesting to me and 12 other people in the United States probably. But
if we were, so
You have 12 buyers of shirts.
yeah. Well, there we go. Our market's expanded. This is good.
so if we were to put you on the spot or ask, all right, so like, to the layman, what's a cool deal? What's an interesting deal that isn't maybe too nuanced that you've been a part of in some of these complex 1031 exchange things where you looked and you said, wow, wow, that was cool? Or is it so technical that the layman?
No. I mean, I'm sure I can think of something. I gotta figure out like what 1031 story is where exciting is when
Helen at a bar.
Yeah. And awesome. While you think about it, you work nationwide, right?
Mhm.
So, you get deals from all over the place. You heard me talk about it this morning, and we talk about it all the time. Baby boomers retiring, largest generational shift in wealth ever, right? A lot of them build businesses, own businesses, real estate. Have you seen an uptick in requests like this from property selling as a part of that demographic? Like, have you seen, more deal flow coming in that fits that demographic?
So I definitely think we're definitely seeing a uptick in M&A transactions of kind of baby boomer created businesses. And many of those, the baby boomers kind of have obviously it's hard to stereotype an entire generation, but this is a very complementary, is that they've many of them have built very impressive businesses, and they've been conservative. I mean, not conservative, just shrewd in a lot of different ways. And one of the ways they've been shrewd is that they've owned the real estate for their business. So we see that a lot where transactions that we've got an M&A side, but then we also have the real estate side because they own their real estate, and sometimes they own a bunch of real estate, like acreage around there too. So if there's one thing that's kind of we're seeing more of, especially in the last couple of years, I think it's that kind of M&A transactions with that demographic, with having a real estate component to it.
And you kind of teed me up perfectly, unless you have a case study that you thought.
Yeah, no, I mean, one of my favorite 1031. It was a multi-month period where one of our estate planning clients we do tax work for was a part seller of a pretty famous ranch in Texas, and had about $50 million of proceeds that we needed to place. So we did like a 1031 exchange buying spree. It was just like we got to do it was like a master class in 1031. Like we were doing a forward exchange for this and a reverse exchange for that, and an accommodation exchange, and getting into a DST for this, and we just, when we had a list of all of these different, like all the dates that we had going and all the closings we had going, it was just this like master project of trying to just like place $50 million because due to some peculiarities, very low tax basis. And I mean, do you really want to pay 23.8% on that? No, you're going to go and spend $50 million.
It's a pretty hefty price tag. Yeah. Right. I'm picturing you and like your colleagues in like a war room, with like a big whiteboard, and you're tracking like 15 deals, right? do you remember how many properties they ended up purchasing?
It was, I think, at least 7.
Yeah.
It was a lot.
Yeah.
There was also a Andy Warhol painting that got sold too, and we were investigating whether we could do a qualified opportunity fund play through that.
Interesting.
So
same client?
Same client, yeah.
Oh,
yeah.
interesting.
So all capital gain is eligible for qualified opportunity zones, which we'll get to in a second, of course. But collectibles, which paintings are, have a 28% rate. Few people know that. There's a separate capital gains rate. So it makes it even spicier for trying to handle.
Is it considered? It's not personal property. Personal property depreciation recapture is a 25% rate. This is collectible.
It's just a special.
My Beanie Baby collection is going to have a 28% capital gains rate.
I mean, you're not going to make any money off that.
I missed the window by like a year.
Yeah. I think there's a collection of that. Parents Attic too. So.
Yeah. Well, just kind of you teed it up perfect. But I was going to ask, the baby boomer demographic, they own a lot of businesses, and you said it. Let's say like an air conditioning company, right? They've operated that for 30 years. They have 100 employees. A lot of those air conditioning warehouses, were in like not the best areas back in the day, and it's where they park their trucks. It's where all the employees go. And now the warehouse districts have like blown up.
Yeah. Now there's a brewery next door, right?
The brewery, the whatever, all this development happening. We're sitting in West Palm Beach right now, and it's absolutely exploding, and that's happening down here. But, when that's happening and they own the business that owns the real estate is worth X, the business is worth Y. As of 2017, they changed the 1031, so you can't exchange business proceeds anymore, right? You can only exchange the real estate proceeds. So, is that something that, you're working on pretty commonly? You kind of teed it up perfectly, and I'm segueing into OZ and OZ 2.0.
Yeah, so let's dive right in. So opportunity zones, new hot topic again, or new old hot topic. They were first created in 2017 with the TCJA. They are back again with the OB3. I have to call it that. One big beautiful bill is just.
You laugh every time you say it, right? The name amuses.
Yeah.
OB3.
It sounds like Star Wars.
It does. It's right. Yeah.
So yeah, it's back again. It's back in full force. Stronger program than even before. So you guys have heard this. Sorry, you had to hang out with me twice in one day, but we're discussing this morning. It's very interesting to me, being a practitioner in both 1031 exchange and doing a lot of OZ work. If you look at 1031 exchanges, they have been around for over 100 years. And when 1031 exchanges first existed, they were wild, wild west.
Yeah.
Like you could even exchange securities at one point in time. Over the last 100 years, the rules for 1031 exchanges, the things that are eligible for 1031 exchange, have continually narrowed. The 180-day and 45-day rules that we are aware of and kind of operate under, which, by the way, are safe harbors.
Right.
They are not, a lot of times people think that if you don't meet the 180 days, there's no hope for you. Technically, it's just a safe harbor. Now I'd rather be in the safe harbor because it's scary outside the safe harbor. There's like Hurricane IRS out there, but the reason safe harbors exist. But pre those in the 60s and 70s, there was actually a court case where a taxpayer sold property and then 5 years later did a 1031 exchange, and the taxpayer won, and the IRS hated that because in order to have efficient and practical administration of the tax code, which I don't agree with the IRS on a lot, I agree with them on this. We can't have transactions stay open in perpetuity. Right. You can't like sell something and tell the IRS like right on your tax return, hey, I'll catch you up in 10 years and figure out how much I owe you.
Right.
No, you got to figure it out. So those rules came out in the 80s, which were limiting, basically, you got to get the exchange done by, or, figure it out kind of by your tax return deadline the next year. Makes sense. As you mentioned, the TCJA, while it was a big tax cut act, it also had a lot of tax fundraisers, and one of them is personal property. Used to be eligible for 1031 exchanges, no longer was. So a lot of businesses that had equipment, heavy equipment, airplanes,
planes, rental car fleets. We work with a group that used to do exchanges en masse of rental car fleets, like a business to business kind of qualified intermediary.
Planes, trains, and automobiles.
Yeah. Can't do anymore. So we keep narrowing and narrowing and narrowing, and then at the same time, here comes this qualified opportunity zone program. So there have been prior versions or prior kind of iterations of programs that encourage taxpayers to invest in economically distressed areas. But this one is very unique in that any capital gain at all is eligible for these QOZ investments. So 1031 exchange, only real property. It's got to be very specific. Like I said, if it's your vacation home, probably not going to work. If you're a dealer in real property, not going to work. But OZ, anything goes. Cryptocurrency, I think that capital gain is going to be eligible. The collectible, the Andy Warhol painting. And as you were getting at, if I've got a business owner who sold their business and has a massive amount of capital gain from just the general sale of their business outside of the real property side, absolutely you need to look at OZ opportunities.
And Austin, if you don't mind, just basic level, what are the timing rules with the OZ, and kind of just what is it conceptually?
Yeah, so the OZ program, again, is meant to encourage taxpayers to invest into economically distressed census areas. People hear that, and sometimes they're like, well, why would I want to put my money there? Well, one, they're not always as bad as you think. Let's just be frank here. Politicians are the ones that determine, while there's rules for what is economically distressed, politicians determine these things. And when I give presentations on this, I encourage you guys, I will oftentimes just show a map of your area.
I think you mentioned Hudson Yards.
Yeah, well, the most famous example, maybe infamous example, is for those of you familiar with Manhattan, there's a multi-billion-dollar development there called Hudson Yards. It's also infamous for its the vessel, which is something people sometimes have issues on that they have to shut down from people jumping. But anyway, the multi-billion-dollar development on Manhattan, and it's hard to believe any part of Manhattan could be an opportunity zone. But based on OZ1 rules, you were able to look at adjacent census tracts, and just across the river is New Jersey, and that census tract adjacent to Hudson Yards, combined with the demographics, created an opportunity zone there.
Well, and on top of that, OZ1 was based on the 2010 census data. And I say this all the time, and I think sometimes it doesn't land or people don't recognize. What happened immediately prior to 2010? We had a great financial crisis, right? So you had this hollowing out of many inner cities, downtown areas that might have in the years prior been vibrant parts of the community. You had this window of time where now they are very depressed. And here we are almost 10 years later. A lot of these areas have come back, but we're still looking at the demographic data from 10 years ago. And so to your point, some of these areas were already on their way up. And then you've got these tax incentives that, pouring gasoline on the fire.
I mean, that's exactly right. So even put politics aside, if you have a program that captures areas that is a snapshot in time, and that snapshot is applicable for a 10-year period,
Right.
as you near the end of that 10-year period, I mean, think of who we are as people. Who were you 10 years ago, right? Not the same person as before.
Right.
A lot of change can happen. So, I mean, I'm from Houston, and the Houston opportunity zones, at least under the old program, there's downtown, there's Edo, there's a couple other places within the loop that are in East Downtown is a good example of that, already up and coming.
Yeah.
There's definitely, it's not, it's a place where a lot of people are interested in.
So OZ1, incentivizing investment, private investment in some of these underserved or distressed census tracts, right? MAP is based on 2010 census data. The incentive for private investment is specifically tax related, deferral of capital gain, right? So capital gain of any kind you mentioned. So we invest, it's 2019, let's say, we invest in one of these qualified opportunity zones. We meet all the criteria, all the regulatory and the compliance work. So we get a deferral of the capital gain that we would have otherwise realized, right, for a period of time. OZ1, that deferral was until December 31st of 2026, so coming up here very shortly. Second benefit there was a reduction of the capital gain that was owed, right, to some extent. There was a 10% step up. There was a 15% step up, kind of funky in the way they designed that, right? We chatted about that this morning. And then the third piece is, and we always kind of joked, it was like Dr. Dre, right? DRE, defer, reduce, eliminate. So the last piece was the elimination, which was I invested in one of these areas. I held my investment for 10 plus years, right? Minimum 10 years. And any growth or gain I saw on my investment comes back tax-free. So eliminate the long-term capital gains, right? So that was OZ 1.0, right? And to your point, capital gain of any kind, short-term capital gain. Right. We had a gentleman back in 2020. I don't know how this man didn't have a heart attack. He was effectively gambling on airlines and cruise line stock options in the middle of COVID.
Crushed it.
And he made $10 million short-term capital gains. Yeah. And he put 7 or 8 million into OZs, for that deferral, that long-term growth.
It's a good thing for him to lock those proceeds up. He couldn't touch them.
Yes. His business didn't work so great. Anyway,
Take his chips off the table.
Yeah. Sort of lock it away. Human psychology, fear and greed, all that stuff. So that's OZ1, right? As we've neared the end of 2026 here, the benefits of OZ1 have diminished, right? The deferral period has shrunk drastically.
It's nothing now, basically.
Yeah, it's this year, right? That step up has been eliminated. But then they pass OB3, and they make permanent this piece of legislation on rolling 10-year periods, right? So talk about OZ 2.0 and kind of the differences or the things that are permanent here moving forward.
So for second shirt idea, Dr. Dre, I like that. Yeah. Defer, reduce, eliminate. That's beautiful.
Takeout was good.
Yeah. This is good. This is good. So we need to add this to
we're gonna have a
last store.
Yeah, whole online merch store, exactly.
Sam tiers.
Yeah, those same 12 people are gonna buy these shirts.
Oh my God, it's gonna be great. Yeah.
Thank you 12 people. So OZ 2.0 is one of the many exciting things about it is that it is permanent. We know have a lot more better understanding this go around than we did the first time. Like it came out and all of us tax practitioners were looking at it, like, it was a joke, right?
The Wild West.
It was passed in 2017, and then the final regs didn't come out until 2 years later, something like that.
Yeah, I mean, it was a long time with no guidance. I spent most of the first 12 months of the OZ program just fielding calls where people asked, but they just didn't know what to do because there wasn't enough guidance.
Right.
So this is different. Like, we know what's going on. There's new things in other parts of the tax code, which we'll talk about. But as far as, some significant differences, one, the old program had kind of hard-coded that deferral. So the deferral was whenever you had your capital gain, but then it came due December 31st, 2026.
So whether you invested in 2019 or 2022, your deferral was until
hard-coded
December 31st, 2026.
So in 2018, if you got into it then, you got 9 years deferral.
Yeah.
You get into it in 2023, you only get 3 years deferral. The new program doesn't matter when you invest, you always get 5 years. Kind of the same thing with the reduction. Because of the hard-coded nature of the December 31st, 2026, the reduction required you to hold it for 7 years prior to December 31st, 2026, or 5 years prior to December 31st, 2026. So once, whatever it was, 21 or 22 came around, mathematically you couldn't get to 5 years anymore.
So now we're 2 benefits instead of 3, just based on the timing of when you invest.
So we went down to 1 benefit, right? So we were less than 5 years.
Right.
So now you always will get the 10% reduction, because you will always get 5 years, because the 5 years is no longer hard-coded. It's just 5 years,
So
unless you have an inclusion event. So if you sell early, but as long as you hold for 5 years, you get your 5 years of deferral.
Yeah.
Which, everybody can discuss what that is, but like deferral, guys, is huge. Like, in tax planning, for those of us who actually do legitimate tax planning, because you can find people who do lots of fun stuff, but the true legitimate tax planning, some of the biggest things you look at are character. So can you get to capital gains?
Mm-hmm.
Right. But one of the other biggest things is deferral.
Yeah.
Because if you get to keep your cash for 5 years, time value, present value adjusted at 8%, just super simple math, that could be 40% discount, right? You can do much more complex math than that. But that's a huge, huge benefit of not having to pay that tax for 5 years.
And so speaking to that, just quickly to put numbers to it. So I generated $1 million capital gain, right? So fast forward, here we sit in 2026. We're in 2027 now. We're in OZ 2.0.
Mm-hmm.
I generated $1 million capital gain. I invest in a qualified opportunity zone fund. I've got a 5-year deferral. So as opposed to paying my taxes in April of 28,
mm-hmm.
right? Because I realized gain in 27. As opposed to paying taxes April of 28, I'm now paying taxes, can I do the math there? April of 2033,
mm-hmm.
right? 5-year deferral. I had $1 million gain. Instead of paying taxes on $1 million gain, now I'm paying taxes on a $900,000 gain, because I got a 10% step up, a 10% reduction is another way to call that, right? So those are the first 2 benefits that are made permanent now, just kind of to put numbers to those.
Yeah. So on $1 million of gain, assuming it's long-term gain, no state taxes, 23.8% rate, net investment income tax, it's $238,000 of tax. You cut 10% off, plus the time value of deferral could be whatever you value that at, but 30,
what can I do with
50%.
my money between now and
but
then?
But we already, based on those benefits, roughly half of the tax is gone.
Right.
And then we get to the big showstopper, which is if you hold for 10 years, 100%, you basically get a basis step up to the fair market value when you sell.
Yeah.
And so let's say that $1 million goes to $2 million.
Right.
Let's say it goes to $3 million. That gain on the 1 to 2 or 1 to 3 is completely not subject to tax. So your $240,000 of tax, half of it goes away. And then let's say that your 1 goes to 3, you would have had another $480,000 of tax that you don't pay at all. Your effective tax rate on this transaction is
small,
a few percent. And I mean, there's some other things that I'll get into or don't need to get into. They're kind of complex, but there is something to be said. Like if you defer your capital gain for 5 years, I've got a lot of very shrewd clients that say, I'm going to figure out how to be in a position in 5 years to have other tax attributes ready to offset that gain.
Sure. Let's generate some losses. Let's harvest some losses over the course of 5 years.
I mean, tax loss harvesting is the easiest for people to understand.
Yeah.
Of if 5 years from now you can go and you find some capital losses that you have, you could sell those, and those capital losses are going to offset your capital gain recognition. 5 years from now.
Well, and it's so defer, reduce, eliminate. The eliminate side, or the step up in basis, it's so powerful when you really think about it, because the only other way to get a step up in basis is to die.
It sure is. Yeah, we maybe one of the few laughs we got this morning. I was saying one of the best 1031 exchange planning techniques. They call it the swap till you drop.
Yep.
I don't have a different name for it,
Yeah.
because I mean that's it.
Kick the can down the road, swap till you drop.
Put it on a shirt.
But
we got another one.
Well, sure.
just to rewind a little bit, because this is so interesting to me. So when OZ1 came out, we were getting calls from clients that were getting offers on their businesses or properties, and they go, Tommy, I can't believe what they want to pay for my business in Hialeah, Florida, or wherever, Atlanta, outskirts of Atlanta or whatever it is. And I would go, well, is your property in an opportunity zone? And they'd go, what's that? They had no idea, because the veil was over a lot of people when it first came out. They had no idea about it. And then you can go online and type in the address and you'd see, hey, well, your property's in an opportunity zone. So with this second round coming out, the new map is going to be drawn, right? And I don't know if you have an idea maybe when that's going to come out, September, October, November, something.
Kevin said July this morning. Is that right?
That sounds right to me.
Okay.
So I'm just curious your thoughts on this, and Justin too, but when the new map is drawn, are we going to get those same kind of calls? People that own properties in rural areas, the early buyers trying to scoop in and get a property for a lower value before, people really catch on to the OZs and the new maps.
Yeah, and I think that segues nicely too into the question we get a lot of, hey, Austin, I've got a property in an OZ.
What can I do with it?
What can I do with it?
Yeah.
What does that mean?
Yeah.
So I think, again, great question. People need to be educated, because I do think that you will see, that can potentially have a pricing impact.
Yeah.
And, you should know that, because you might be able to negotiate for and make sure whoever your, broker is, et cetera, is educated enough to understand what these are and has an idea of maybe how that's affecting cap rates, multiples, valuations. So
You'll see a lot of the new commercial real estate, broker flyers coming out with opportunity zone.
Yes.
With the
They market the fact
Mhm.
that the property. I remember LoopNet added a section, right? LoopNet commercial real estate listing, website added a section. Is it in an opportunity zone? Yes or no?
Yeah.
Now it's like one of their form fields that you have to fill out when you post something.
Yeah.
Listing to their site.
So, I mean, a question is like, remember, in fact, we didn't get into this.
Yeah.
The opportunity zones, they sound great and they are great when they work, but boy, they are complex. You got to actually check all the boxes, because Congress is not just handing out free money. You've got to actually buy something and make it better.
Yeah.
The spirit of the legislation is you are using your deployed capital to make economically distressed census areas better. So you can't just buy a piece of land. There's a example in the regs that basically you can't put a hot dog stand on 100 acres of land and say, I made it better.
Yeah.
Give me my tax benefit. It doesn't work.
I say that all the time because people ask that question. I say, you can't just buy some dilapidated old building and slap a new coat of paint on it. There's specific compliance guidelines for what constitutes, quote, making it better, right?
There's
Substantial
There's,
improvement.
in fact, math.
Yeah, there you go.
Much hard math. Like, exciting math.
Yeah.
Well, and that's like, I think Kevin said it earlier, the tax tail wagging the dog, that whole thing, where it's, you want it to be good real estate at the end of the day. You're not doing it for the tax benefit. The tax benefit's like the cherry on top.
Right.
Right. But you set it up for the perfect kind of next question here is, I'm sure you get the question all the time. Hey, Austin, I don't want to go into an opportunity zone fund with a sponsor. Can I create my own OZ or OZ fund? And what's that process like? I mean, when you get that question from a really high net worth family, maybe a family office, hey, we own some real estate in an OZ, or we want to buy some real estate in an OZ. How do we do that? What's the steps?
I'll tack on to that because it's a question we get a lot of, and it kind of feeds into all of this. You own property in an OZ.
Yep.
Can you contribute that to your own OZ fund, right? I'm sure I used to get that question frequently.
Yeah, great questions. Happy to answer. So the first one, I think probably because the word fund is in the name, that there is a common misconception that a qualified opportunity fund must have multiple diverse owners in multiple properties. And that's just not true. There is a spectrum of what we see in the market. So on one end of the market are what I consider the widely marketed opportunity fund products that a JP Morgan Chase might market. And they're I don't do securities. I rely on my great securities partners, but this is probably, I think we'd consider kind of like general solicitation like stuff, right?
Sure.
You guys are the securities guys, right?
Yeah.
You can answer this.
Yes. Yeah. It's Reg D, private placements, 506B, 506C. It's the DST companies, the 1031 companies that we work with, roll out product like that. They identified an opportunity, the retail accredited investor, who has 100, 200, 500,000 in gain, a few million in gain, doesn't have the means or the desire to do it themselves,
Yeah.
so they invest in a fund with a high quality sponsor, right, who's going to do it for them.
Yeah.
They're going to pull
And
capital.
and believe me, those are great product. I don't have, I leave it to you guys on those stories
Sure.
because, the sponsor might need me, but the individuals don't need me because everything's already prepackaged, which is the beauty of it, right? Is that if it's the solution for you, everything's already done.
Right.
There's, a middle ground of, kind of smaller sponsors that may be doing more Reg D, friends and family, like not that dissimilar from, you're really just kind of talking security nuances, but they can kind of be different in the number of investors, maybe liquidity options. But on the other end of the spectrum is you can have a fund, as I say, with you and yourself.
Right.
So opportunity funds have to have at least 2 taxpayers. It's a weird quirk. You have to be a tax partnership, or you have to have 2 if you're going to be a partnership, which generally we don't want to put real estate into a corporation. But it's possible for you and your spouse, you and a trust for your child, you and an S corporation that owns 0.1%. You can create a fund structure that you basically solely owned, and it can have one asset.
Yeah.
And we do that all the time.
Yeah.
I've got clients that, sell their business, sell their real estate, and they're like, hey, I got something else I'm excited about doing. And we create a fund structure for them, and it absolutely works. You hit the nail on the head. Always tell people, don't let the tax tail wag the dog. Always look and see, is the gain worth deferring? Is it worth the complexity of the structure? But if the answer is yes, then absolutely, you've got opportunities to, do a do-it-yourself fund. You don't have to get into one of the larger ones. But understand, do-it-yourself means you're doing it.
Yeah.
And there's a lot to do.
Yeah.
Well, and it's interesting too, because we didn't touch on this. Maybe I missed it, but when you're weighing the difference between the 1031 and an OZ, we get this all the time where somebody will come to us and they have a really high basis. Right. They're selling for $2 million and their basis is $1 million. Right. So anytime we encounter that and they kind of fit the bill, maybe they're not 80 plus years old and a 10-year hold isn't really something that's suitable for them, given their net worth or given their overall situation, we kind of evaluate it. But if their basis is really high, it does warrant the question of maybe you should consider OZs over the 1031 because you only invest the gain. You get to keep that dry powder, your basis, and you can invest it however you want. So, that's a really powerful piece that I don't think a lot of people really know. The 1031, you have to invest the full amount to get the full deferral.
Right.
With the OZ, it's just the gain. You keep the basis.
And I'll tack on to that too, because we've seen variations of that where relatively high basis, but also a decent amount of debt on the relinquished property, right? And so in the 1031 exchange, just like you have to exchange the full amount, you also have to replace the debt that is paid off on the relinquished property. No such rule with QOZs, right? So these people who don't necessarily want to, and I mean, they have debt from 5 years ago, it was low interest rate debt. Today the debt markets are different. So, you don't want to go get a new mortgage. You don't want to go get more debt, so you can look at an opportunity zone where you just invest the gain and you're not beholden to some of those other, 1031 rules. So it's interesting. It can be a little more flexible.
Yeah. I mean, I'll unpack a little of that. And I do want to answer your question because it's a great one about what happens if can I use my own property?
Sure.
But getting back to the, 1031 versus QOZ. So 1031, well put, you've got to reinvest all of your gain. You've got to redeploy or your relinquished property has to have as much debt or more as your replacement debt. And that's complex. People think they can take their basis off the table, and you cannot without recognizing gain. The OZ, you can choose to reinvest $1 of a gain, all of your gain, none of your gain. You can do whatever you want. And in the meantime, you don't have that cash. You can put it in the stock market. You've got 180 days, but sometimes it's more than 180 days.
Right.
Because there's a special rule that if the gain is allocated to you from a pass-through entity, so let's say you've got an S corp or a partnership business sale, right? You need an asset sale. That gain is going to be allocated to you on a K1. So let's say you sold your business January 1st, 2026. You decide you want to do a QOZ. You actually have until 180 days after March 15th, 2027. You could have until September 15th, 2027 to deploy the QOF funds.
Which is what, 21 months, something
It
like
is
that.
wild. And
Yeah.
during that time, you can do whatever you want with that cash.
Right.
You can invest in the stock market. And when you ultimately deploy the funds, you don't have to like trace them. You can have, it doesn't matter where they came from.
You go to the casino, you put it all on black, you double it, and then you take the capital gain. Now you've got an income problem, right? Because you just doubled it all, But no, it's
cruise company stock options, right?
Yeah,
Those look great.
exactly.
Well,
Yeah.
On that same thread, so let's hit on this because this is, I mean, we see this all the time too. Somebody's in an exchange, they get past 45, they only identify one property. We can't stand when we see this. You have 3 slots on there at least, put some backups in place, but they only identify one property. It falls through, they can't close on it for one reason or another, and they're going to owe taxes, but they can use proceeds from outside of the exchange account to still use as a backup or a parachute, whatever you want to call it, to go into an OZ.
Yeah, I do want to reiterate something you just said because you guys actually taught me this. If you don't have 3 replacement properties, you really should consider putting one of these DSTs as your third, because at worst, you just don't use it. And at best, you have an opportunity to have a backup. So I am 100% agree with you guys that there's no reason not to fill out and have your, an extra option. But if you decide you're not going to do the 1031, absolutely. You can do both 1031 and the QOF, that if the 1031 fails, you can then QOF the gain. You also could, if you had a 1031 exchange where you had some gain recognized from boots, that capital gain would be eligible for a QOF investment.
Yeah.
So you can actually do a combo of the two.
Combination of the two. Yeah. So go back to, because I did get this question a lot years ago. And as the benefits diminished, as you won, we got the question less. And I'm sure January 2nd of next year, my phone's gonna blow up and start getting this question again. So I own property in an OZ. What can I do with it?
Okay, it's a great question. So in general, the default rule is you've got to acquire. It's got to be an original acquisition of the property to be a good asset.
Okay,
and there are hundreds of pages of regulations, and like they even at some point, even me, as excited as I am about it, like it gets pretty into the weeds. But I'm not going to get too far in there. But there's these percentages you have to meet, right?
Okay.
And if you do a 2-tier structure, you've got to have 70% of your assets be qualifying assets.
Okay.
Okay. So if you have land in an OZ, the simplest thing to do actually is you could lease it to your opportunity zone.
Okay.
If you lease it, the leased asset is a good asset. However, the value of the land is not included in the QOF because
with the long-term, with tax-free growth.
Exactly.
Okay.
Exactly. Because it's not the leasehold, the lessor estate is outside.
Sure.
But that is one way you could lease it to your QOF.
Yeah.
That works. If you want to get the value,
I want my land. It's prime for development, and I want to develop.
Right.
And I want to get my land into the OZ because I want all the gain to be long-term tax-free.
Yeah. So there's really 2 main strategies.
Yeah.
One is you need to get your ownership percentage in the QOF under 20%.
Okay.
So the related party rules, there are 100 different sections in the code that have related party rules. This particular flavor applies a 20% test instead of a 50% test.
So my land's valued at $1 million. I contribute my land to the partnership, to the QOF, right? And I raise $4 million from outside investors, right? So it's a $5 million QOF fund, let's say, $1 million of land, $4 million of cash. I'm a 20% owner, something like that.
You're going to want to sell it though, because you need to, in order to get QOZ benefits, these things start to get nice and complex.
I got to recognize.
You got to recognize gain, and you have to reinvest capital gain.
Okay.
So you could sell it to the QOZ, and as long as you own less than 20% of the QOZ, you're eligible to reinvest that capital gain, and that land would be a good asset. So we've done that before, where we got somebody to like 19.999, and that's fine. The other thing you can do is if you can keep the land value under the 30% bad asset, then you can pass the test. And if you've got raw land that you're building something on, so we worked on a hotel in Tuscaloosa, and land was a bad asset, but the building was new, like it's improvements. It's clearly a good asset. And so we were able to kind of thread the needle of the value of the lands versus the value of the buildings. There's these specific timelines for every 6 months. You got to look under the hood and see if you pass the test or not. So
make sure that those proportions stay where they're supposed to be.
Yeah,
or
so-
or the limit.
there are, each one of those pass works, they all have their pros and cons.
Sure.
And, you know, if you can hear some of the drilling, we could just say,
We're in a
filming this in a,
we're in an opportunity zone, right?
you know, we're doing substantial improvements.
We're doing, yeah.
Austin, really incredible having you here, man. Really.
Yeah, thanks, guys.
You know,
Fun.
thanks for coming to town. This has been great. And I mean, there's so much to unpack here. I mean,
Yeah.
we could go on and on. There's so many things that we didn't even touch on. So we're talking about partnership issues, restructuring, you know, approaching it ahead of time, OZ1, OZ 2.0. I think we might need to do an Austin podcast 2.0.
Yeah, that sounds
Become
good.
with the feature,
Yeah.
you know, next time. But thanks again, man, for coming here today.
Absolutely, guys.
Yeah. Any closing thoughts?
I'm really excited for the merchandise store. You know, the T-shirts that we're gonna get printed up, the you know, distribute and exchange, the swap till you drop. You know, we had a lot of good stuff that, you know, I'm sure I'm the only one that thinks is funny. But
If we sell it from here, we can get OZ benefits.
we gotta
That could be a qualifying as a
really pile in here.
Yeah.
But no, I mean, it was fun. Appreciate you coming,
guys.
Yeah.
You're the man. Thanks, Austin. All right. Tune in next time. We're going to have Austin back. Thank you guys for listening.